Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're from the US. We just give it a minute, because we see a lot of people still joining, and then we will start the webcast. Okay, welcome everyone to the K3 Fashion Spring Release event. Really to have you here in this webcast where we show what we've been doing in the past half year. Similar format like you've seen before. So Gerard doing the majority of the talking and the demoing, like how no one else can do that in his own special way. Yeah, we have a lot of good new features. Our spring release event, although it's more, at least here in the Netherlands, more summer than spring, because it's really 28 degrees here and very sunny and warm. But we try to keep a cool head and talk you through all the new cool features. So can you go to the next slide here? Well, like always, this session will be recorded, and we will make that recording available afterwards, like we used to. We will put everybody on mute throughout the whole session, but you're free to ask your questions in the question or the chat box. And during the session, I will watch it and we'll try to ask the relevant questions to Gerard, and then he will try to answer normally it's almost answering them all. So feel free to ask them. The technicals behind this release, so based on 10.0.25, platform update 50. The more details about that on our documentation portal. For this one, we don't have new license files, are not required, and it's delivered like we're used to do that now for, I guess a couple of years already, as a global restricted solution package. And you can, if there's anything you'd like to know, please use the support portal, because that's easier for us to manage questions than if you go send them all to our mailbox. Apart from, of course, today in the chat, it's also very easy for us to handle them. So on a high level, I guess this is the highlights of the release. So here it will show the new costing feature. Really cool and a very nice addition, and also in a big demand by partners and customers. Then he will go into the seasonal range planning and preview. So the added to the existing range planning, but a bit more seasonal view and take on it. A nice way to have another allocation preview and insight to be more flexible there. We have some new features in the CSR classification that Gerard will show. A really cool one, and also one that I'm really curious about your feedback, is the PDM measurements, because I think we might be the only ones having this in the world. But really like to see what you think about that. And last but not least, we have a new dashboard added, like we already had one on sales side. We also now have a fashion dashboard on the purchase side to bring everything together. And then I give the word to Gerard, and I think we will put off our cameras to make sure that the full screen is available for to see dynamics, because it might be tiny already. So enjoy, and like I said, please feel free to ask questions in the meantime.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. First topic, I will talk about 2 topics and then show it within Dynamics. And the second part will be 4 topics, smaller in size, and show them too. The first topic is costing. This is the first release where we added our new costing functionality, which means that you can use it, you can work with it. We would like to have the different responses on it, and we will be extending on it. So now it's costing and only for the purchase side. We will extend it for the production side. And although we're talking about the spring release, there's already been an additional small release last Friday, which also includes some tiny adjustments to this costing part. They're included in here. So it's more about viewing and selection options. Costing. Well, if you work with standard dynamics, there's basically no easy way to define a costing structure for an item, calculate, activate, and use those surcharges. Of course, they have the costing sheets, which you can open just by one person at a time. The moment you have multiple costing structures, it just becomes one huge costing sheet. So we thought, okay, maybe it's better to make it more easy. So we're not limiting the possibilities, but we're making it way easier to use. So this costing part enables users to easily create and calculate item prices from purchase price to cost price to sales price and recommended retail price and backwards. A flexible calculation structure definition, that means you can define as many definitions, and you can see one on the right in the screenshot, as you want. And flexible surcharge definition, so you can define as many surcharges as you want. We only have included 4 subtypes, which is freight, license, commission, and duties, which have underlying supporting tables to suggest the costs. You can of course always overrule them when creating a item costing sheet. Of course, it includes a top-down and bottom-up calculation, so you could change the purchase price and it will calculate down. You could change the sales price and calculate back up, or any parts in between. In our next release, we will even make it able to adjust the recommended retail price and calculate upwards and downwards again. There's 2 major parts. One is a single item calculation, so you can create an item costing sheet for a single item, do your calculation there, publish when ready, or you could do it for a multiple number of items, and we use that a costing calculation plan. It holds the same functionality, but a costing calculation plan, you just load in a bunch of items, do the calculation, change values in there and publish them. They will create an item costing sheet for each item and activate the prices if needed. Of course, surcharges, they will be posted during item receipt / invoice as in standard dynamics. Second topic, which I will show you, is seasonal range planning and preview. Seasonal range planning is an extension on the existing range planning functionality to be able to define season and drops into the calculation. So you can add season and drops to the range planning product groups. So they will only be used when you actually create a range plan for a specific season or a specific drop. So you could add them in both. And we added a preview in the range plan. Range planning, as it was before, you could set it up and you could calculate and you could post it. And the outcome could be a item coverage record, transfer journal, etc. But you would only see the outcome after actually posting it. Now we added a form preview where you can see the outcome before posting. You can edit it, you can change it, and then post it. So before we go into the environment, I see some questions pop up or not?
No, that was me
Okay.
seeing that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, no, you're right, there is a question.
See, there is a question.
Oh, yeah, well, it's a question whether this session is also covering Dynamics Business Central. But no, that's not the case. It will just be on K3 Fashion, so based on Dynamics F&O. Yesterday there was a webcast for Business Central. So sorry that you've missed it, but that's been recorded as well. So we will make sure that it's being shared. Yeah, so typically if we talk about Pebblestone, then that's the Business Central session. And K3 Fashion, then it's the Dynamics F&O session.
Okay. Let's continue. Let's try to explain some part of the costing. To be honest, we have also created a video within our documentation portal explaining in detail every part of the costing module we already built. I think it's a video of 40-45 minutes or so. So it's always worth viewing that part. So let's start a bit here. Within the section Product and Information Management, we have, well, section costing, from surcharges to costing calculation plan. And of course, we do have some parameters needed for setting up. So if we go to inventory management and inventory management parameters, we have the inventory accounting section where you can enable the item costing sheet. If you don't enable it, you cannot use it, and it will fall back to the standard calculation of the costing sheet within Dynamics. If you enable this one, it will use the new item costing sheet. And of course, you can define a exchange rate type, which will be used when defining surcharges in different exchange rates or different exchange codes. So you can define your exchange rate used for calculation yourself. These are basically the parameters you need. But let's go back to product information management and let me walk through the different sections.
Gerard, I cannot hear you anymore. Gerard? Gerard?
Yeah.
Your internet connection, I think, is really bad.
Can you hear me now?
Gerard, we missed, I think, the last minute. Yeah, we missed the last minute, or at least I missed the last minute.
Okay. I'm gonna move over.
So you need to go back to the last screen.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, and people are saying it's me because everybody else can still hear you. So it was my problem, sorry.
Okay. Okay, well, then I can skip this part.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't need to explain this part again.
No, sorry, it was just me.
So, product information management. If we scroll to the right, we have all kinds of options. And the first option is the surcharges themselves. So surcharges, let me open the screen, and I've created a couple of examples which you can use. A surcharge is a part you add to a cost price or a purchase price to come to a cost price, sales price, or recommended retail price. They could either be of the type percentage, or they could be of a type value. Makes sense, right? Either you add a percentage or either you add a value to a specific part. What you see here is we also have subtypes, and subtypes means that we have defined underlying tables where you can predefine the values which will be used at a later stage. I will go into those underlying tables in a minute. We also have some posting, ledger posting set up, and at this moment we're only using the top two. Those will be used during the posting of the purchase order receipt and the purchase order invoice. The other ones will extend the moment we're gonna extend our costing module into production. So when actually creating a production order and posting those surcharges. So for the time being, only this one and only this one will be used. But I will show you in a couple of minutes. A subtype is not mandatory, so you can define any surcharge you want and make sure you can use it at a later stage. If you go a bit to the right again, like I said, in the surcharges we have 4 subtypes: freight, duty, licensing, commission. Let's open a few. Freight surcharges. In here we can define per category node, which could be all, per mode of delivery, delivery terms, origin country, destination country. We can define what the freight charges will be per quantity, or even include a fixed fee. So in this case, 264 per one. And I'm not sure if we have here, we have a fixed fee plus 537 per one, which ends up in a surcharge of the type freight per item for this. You can define as many as you want, and of course, if you only need a higher level, so level all, it will inherit downwards. These fields are found on the item itself. So we added a section mode of delivery and delivery terms in the costing part on the released item. Origin country, that was already there. Destination country is basically the country of the legal entity, or if the destination country of a specific item is different, you can define it on the item. And of course, you can define the currency which will be used for calculating this.
Gerard, a question in the meantime. Yeah. Which category is used? The commerce category or another one?
This is the commerce category. So it's not a special category for this one. So we're using the commerce hierarchy. Freight charges, duty surcharges is a bit more limited. Category, origin country, commodity code. This is for the ICT deliveries with a percentage. We have licensing surcharges, also category, season, brand dependent. So for the different brands, you can add a different percentage or an amount. And last but not least, commission surcharges, category, origin, and season dependent. If it makes sense to add more dependencies in the future, please let us know. For now, these are the dependencies which we use to calculate, well, the values which will be used during costing calculation. Now the fun starts, because we have set up surcharges which can be used. We have set up the supporting tables for calculation purposes. We do need to define a cost version per site parameters, and that's because the moment you're using standard cost price, you just don't want to calculate a new cost price, but you always also want to activate a new cost price. In this setup, you need to define per site which you're using which costing version will be used for activating calculated standard cost prices. Of course, if you don't use standard cost price with FIFO, LIFO, or a weighted average, this is not needed. But again, then it won't activate a standard cost price. It will update the cost price on the item, and it will still use the surcharges defined in the item costing sheet when receiving goods from a purchase order. Next step is a calculation structure. And a calculation structure is a structure that you can use at a later stage for calculating the cost price of an item or even multiple items in one go. And as you can see, structures might be different. You always, in this case, you start with a purchase price. You can add surcharges as you go. You could add subtotals. So the moment I have a subtotal and I have a surcharge, which is a percentage, then it's automatically based on the previous subtotal. So it's a matter of, well, how you set it up. And in this case, duty is based on the purchase price plus freight, which ends up in this subtotal. In this example, we just have a purchase price, add 4 surcharges, have a cost price, add a margin, which will calculate sales price, add a retail margin, which will calculate the recommended retail price. Of course, calculating recommended retail price will apply a rounding rule if you define one, and whether or not the retail margin for calculating a recommended retail price is based on the cost price or on the sales price is a setup which you can do on the item itself. So this is a structure, and you can, well, easily can create as many as you want. Let me open an item to see how this works. Product information management, pick a release product. It's probably 201. Casual shirt inventory. Within the managed cost, we have an option item costing sheet. There's one already with an expiry date of never, but let's create a new one because, well, you can create as many as you want, and you can create well, in two different ways, either manually, creation mode is manually, or use the costing calculation plan to create it for multiple items. It will have another creation mode. But let's create a new one. I first need to define which structure will I be using for this specific item. Well, let's use the full structure. It will give me a warning that there is a previous one, and this will be adjusted by this change, of course, because as you can see, the previous one is only valid until yesterday now, and this will be valid from today until never, or if I push an end date, it will be until an end date. It will pick up the setup as defined on the item. It will pick up my purchase price without me having to do anything based on these settings: brand, season, mode of delivery, delivery term, origin country, and everything else, which were used in those supporting table. It will suggest me the freight costs, the license cost, the commission, and the duty. It will add up to a cost price. It will add a margin, add up to a sales price, add a retail margin, and then you will end up with a recommended retail price. In the spring release, you still had to manually fill in the margin and the retail margin. In the release we released last week, you are able to define these settings on the commerce hierarchy, to predefine. They will be inherited to the item, including on how to calculate the recommended retail price. Either it's based on the cost price plus margin, or sales price plus margin. So I encourage you to get the latest release to make life a bit easier. Like I said, it works down and upwards because I can still overrule the settings. It will calculate this way, or if I say, well, I want a cost price of 8, it will calculate backwards, stating my purchase price should be that. Sales price will be this, and this will be $16.95. In here, this version, I cannot change this one, recommended retail price, but the next version, my recommended retail price should also trigger a backwards calculation. As you can see, although I've changed these values and I add a sales margin of 100%, so an additional 803, because this one is based on the cost price, after applying a rounding, you actually have a different retail margin, right? So it shows you purely for informational purposes. And that's because of the rounding rule. So I'm having a margin of 100, but it's rounded up to 16.95. So actually I have a margin of 111.8. During publishing, if you're happy with this, right, depending on the setup of the item, if it's using standard cost price, I can calculate the standard cost price and even activate it in one go. I can calculate the recommended retail price, activate it, and I can calculate the sales price and activate it, all in one go. So if I press OK, it will go into publishing stage. Let's see how long this will take. I can continue from here, of course, but let's wait a bit. I think it's the first time I did this today, so it's a bit slow. Yeah, it's published. So what it will do the calculation. It will activate a cost price, a sales price, and a recommended retail price for all sites we have available. So let's move this a bit. If I close this now, and I'll go to see my item price. Pending prices, there are none, because I decided not just to calculate, but also activate. If I only calculated and did not activate, you would have pending prices, which you need to activate manually. But we also have active prices. So we can see the 803, the 16.95, and the sales price for each site we have set up in Dynamics. This is a single item, so it's, well, still manually, but you can do it per item. To make life a bit easier, we have also what we call a costing calculation plan. And of course, there's a number sequence attached to it, which you need to set up in the parameters. But let's create one. So we're going to create a new costing calculation plan. Well, demo what's new. It's in draft. Again, I need to pick up a structure which I want to be using within this calculation plan. And I'm going to add products. I can add it manually or just select the products I want. Let's see, anything that starts with 350. And let's pick this and this one. What will it do in this case? It will, well, of course, give me the lines. It will show me the values which are, well, responsible for calculating freight charges, duty charges, etc. All for all supporting tables. In here, I can either manually change these settings or select multiple and change them in bulk. So if I want to change the mode of delivery, I can update it here for the selected lines. And of course, if you have many items, this will make sense. The next step will be to calculate. And of course, everything you calculate can be run in batch. Let me see. It's being calculated. And the outcome, well, it's a rather big form. We can see the same item costing sheet, but instead of top down, it's from left to right, where we can see per item the different values which, well, are which the calculation depends on, right? Again, it starts with a purchase price, freight, license, commission, duty, ends up to the cost price, margin, sales, retail margin, recommended retail price. In here, I still have the option to bulk edit those settings for all lines or selected lines, or even say, let's, for this one and this one, bulk edit values and change my purchase price into 6, or let's put 9. It will still do the same calculation, and even here I can change it from left to right, or in this case, if I want to end up with 16, from right to left. In here we have all additional fields which, well, doesn't make sense to put in the grid itself because of viewing. We will make this part collapsible. The moment you think this is okay for a bunch of items, the result is the same. We can still publish it. You will get the same options: calculate the standard cost price and activate, calculate recommended retail price, activate, and even those will run a publishing job. Let me see, it's already finished. And if we go back for this specific item, let's go back this way. In the background, what it did, it created an item costing sheet. There was already an existing one, which it ended, of course, yesterday. And there's a new one created based on this costing calculation plan. Creation mode is costing calculation plan with a reference to the plan ID. In a nutshell, this is basically what our costing calculation will do, except for one part.
Oh.
Yeah, sure.
I do have a question for you. What will happen when you also use trade agreements?
At this moment, not, because we need to extend it, or we want to extend it to variant level, because it might be, well, it depends on the level on which you set up your trade agreements. If you set it up on item level, it won't be an issue. It would pick up, or it should pick up, the purchase price from the trade agreement, including a line discount, right, from the item itself. We are working on that part also to include it on variant level, because it could be different that for the extra small, you have a different price than the medium or the extra large. So that's an extension we still need to build, but we are aware of that. As it is now, it picks up the purchase price from the item.
The trade agreement overrules, right? Like it is now, it also overrules the item card.
Yeah, but as it is now, it doesn't overrule, so we still need to add that part. But the problem starts when you're having different trade agreements for different variants, because then this purchase price, although it's set on an item, could be different, right? This is a $9 in this case, but in case it could, in fact, it could be $8.50 for the small ones and $9 for the medium ones and $9.50. So that's an extension we still need to do, adding the base trade agreement for just the item. We will add that in the next release, next to some other stuff, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
But like I said, it's the first release on this functionality, but we are aware of this question.
Yeah. Thank you.
What is important to know that we now have an active item costing sheet with surcharges defined with their posting or their ledger accounts when used during posting. So that means the moment we're going to create a purchase order, let me just create a purchase order. The values of those surcharges will be posted on receipt and on invoice, and depending on the ledger accounts, of course. On receipt, it's a estimated one, and on invoice, it's the actual one. So if we create a new purchase order, and we'll pick a one. Let's just pick a vendor. Please wait. We're gonna add an item 35201, I think. This should trigger a matrix. Let's put one here. Of course, we can see the prices, which should be €5. We press OK. Of course, the normal procedure, we have to confirm. Yeah. And after confirming, when Dynamics think it's confirmed, we can receive, so we can post a product receipt or through to the warehouse, of course. Let me say receipt 001693. I press OK. And during the posting of the product receipt and during posting of the invoice, the surcharges as defined within my item costing sheet, those values will be posted on ledger accounts as costs to be expected. So if I go to the product receipt, I go to view accounting, we have the different estimated indirect costs. Of course, you could have rounding variance when you have a difference between your standard cost price or the purchase price that the standard cost price is based on and your actual purchase price. And you can even see it on a line level. We can see the purchase indirect costs per piece. So the freight, the license, the commission, and the duty in this case, with the amount and the ledger accounts which will be used. Of course, the moment I post the invoice, those will be reversed and will be posted not to the estimated ledger account, but to the actual ledger account. This is the part I want to show about the costing. Of course, if you want to have more details, I would advise you to, well, look at the video we put online. It's a 45-minute video, so at least I will go through the setup and use a bit slower.
Yeah, so that's a specific video on costing, right? 45 minutes just all details of costing.
Yeah, because this is a complete new topic. I added a video just for this part.
Yeah.
Second topic, seasonal planning and preview. We did not change a lot on range planning itself. So the base functionality of range planning did not change, but we added the option to define season and drops, which will be used when creating a range plan for filtering at a further stage. So let me try to show you. Within the retail and commerce section, we have the range plan itself, and we have the different setup with the range planning groups, the performance groups, the product groups, and a range planning matrix. So the first part where we added a season and a drop option is on the range planning product group. So let me do it like this. For demo purposes, I've set up two groups. Well, those are my initials. The core, which has a subgroup core spring, which contains the black, the blue, and the cream. But if you look at season, there are no specific season defined here. So this group is not limited to a season. So it's valid for all season. If we go here, so that's the subgroup of the core group. There are the green, the orange, and the red ones, but those are limited only for the 2022 spring season. As you can see, I can even limit it per drop. And those values will be used at a later stage when I'm going to create a range plan. And I can optionally also say this range plan is only valid for a specific season. It will filter out the products which belong to a range planning product group, which only belongs to either all seasons. So the core will always be there. But if I create a range plan which is not for spring, it should exclude those items. How does that look here? If I go to a range plan and accidentally I created two range plans, and then I'll also will show you the preview. So I'm not aware, it was released before the spring release, but in an intermediate release, so it's worth showing. So I've created a range plan for all seasons. So if I open it one, and I've set up a source with black, blue, and orange 1,000 pieces of that item. And the outcome should go to item coverage records. I won't post it, but I can show you what will be calculated. And I've added two operating units. Those operating units belong to a group and to a range planning group. And on that range planning group, I have defined look in my core and my spring range planning product group, like you use to set up the normal range plan. As you can see here, we now have an option to calculate. I press OK. This will calculate the range plan, but will also enable a preview. So you can view what will the outcome be. So how will those 3,000 pieces with an allowed rounding difference be allocated over my different operating units? So in this case, my stores. It will give me a total 3006. This is the value, this is the retail value. But if I open my preview, I can actually see how those will be allocated. So let me close this form a bit. So we can see for each item or each store item, size and color combination, that those will be allocated like this. As you can see, this includes the orange ones, and that's because my range plan does not have a season limitation. The moment I'm gonna view my other range plan and do the same calculation. So let's go here This one is for the summer, and it has actually the same setup. So Atlanta, Boston, it has the same source reference. So it will try to allocate 3,000 pieces, but I have defined that this range plan is only valid for season 2022 summer. So it needs to only include items from our source plan, which actually belongs to a range planning product group, which is marked for summer. And I know my core group isn't marked for any season, so those will be valid. But the other group, which is part of it, is my spring group, that's marked for 2022 spring. So those items within that group should be excluded, although I don't need to change anything in my setup. If I do the same here, if I calculate, it will end up showing, okay, in this case, I have allocated 2004 pieces with this cost value and this retail value. If I look at my preview, I will see that the orange ones, which were part of my source journal, were not part of my summer product group because I did not define a summer product group. So they are excluded from this calculation. This preview, and that's also nice to know, you can set it to enable editing. So you now could manually interfere with the outcome. So let's see, what is it? This, come on. Edit, sorry, need to press edit. And then I can say, I don't want to, sorry, to allocate 111 pieces, but 109. The moment I change a quantity here, within the top section, it will give me which item, size, and color combination is available to allocate somewhere else, because I still have the total quantity of 2004, which were calculated, which I would like to allocate in a different way. So I could either change it manually, reallocate it, or calculate it back again, and then it will be set to the normal calculation again. So what did we add within this range planning part is the option to define a season. So it will filter out items which doesn't belong to that specific season. We added an option to view and edit a preview, also to clear it, of course, then it's empty. If I calculate it again, it will create my calculation preview again, and I can do whatever I want with it. After that, I can still post it, and it will end up as item coverage records, or in this case, planned item coverage records, which will be posted into item coverage records when the date is due for them to be activated. So we added the step in the middle, and this was, well, a nice addition, because up to this moment you could only see the outcome after posting, and now you can see the outcome in a preview. What is the result of the setup of my range planning? Any questions on this part? I know that my colleague Rick has also updated the documentation on this part. I'm not sure if he has already created a new video on this part, but he will be back next week, so I can ask. But
No questions for the moment, but I think it's good to know that a lot of this was coming from actual customer and partner feedback.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just improving usability and real life scenarios there.
Yeah, because
so let's go to the next topic, because we also need to be a bit time conscious.
Yes, okay, so let's switch back to this part. Allocation preview and insight. Okay, we have our order allocation within our release to warehouse section, where you can filter, run allocations, calculate, etc., and do it manually step by step. Fine, works perfect. Next to that, we created what we call the order allocation definitions, where you could run those same calculations in a batch, and it would end up with the release to warehouse part. But it was sort of a batch job, which was a black box. Then we got responses from customers. Okay, but what if we now can do the calculation and the reservation and filtering in batch, and then stop at a certain moment. And we can open it or fetch the result in the release to warehouse and then manually interfere a bit, change something, and then release it to the warehouse. Is that an option? So that's what we did. So we enabled to define allocation definitions again. They were already, which can be executed in batch, but can manually be viewed and continue by the user at a later stage. So there's no need anymore for a mandatory release to warehouse step, which was there in the past, and I will show you in a couple of minutes. You could only create allocation definition, and the last step needed to be released to warehouse. Now you can stop at any moment. What has been run in batch can be viewed and can be opened to continue from there. I will show you. Next part, what I will show you, and there are those are four small parts, is pending CSR classification. And this also came from responses from partners and customers stating that, okay, adding a CSR classification to a vendor or a production site, which has a mandatory checklist, I can now only add that CSR classification if I actually checkmark all the mandatory steps. But what if while adding, I'm not sure about it? So I want to sort of park it, save it, and continue at a later stage. So what we did is we added the option when adding a CSR classification to save it as pending. So there's no need to tick mark all mandatory checklist item. You can park it as a pending and later on fetch it and edit it, complete all check marks, and then add it as a CSR classification. Next part, which I will show you, you're probably all aware that in the web shop, the standard web shop, we added different sections on PDM for the product. We added the wash and care instructions, we added the CSR classifications, we added the brand, country of origin, and now we also added the measurements. So the measurements which you can set up within Dynamics can be published to the web shop, to the item. There are some limitations because you would have the option, or you need to choose which phase of the measurements, because in our case, measurements are linked to a certain phase of the item, which phase will be used to publish to e-commerce. And you can define which measurement positions you want to publish to e-commerce, because it might be that you have many positions on an item, but you don't want to publish them all to your website. And last but not least, it also supports measurements per size and fit. I will show you in a couple of minutes in the back end of Dynamics, and then I will show you how it might look on your e-commerce part. And the last part,
I guess this is really powerful because, well, of course, there are a lot of brands that publish their average inseam length on their websites for products, but with this one, you can really publish it for the specific individual designs. And if you're short like me, then that could be really helpful to know whether a fit could be good for you. But I guess in the end, that also makes it more sustainable, because what we all want is less returns in the web shop to save cost. And well, it helps, right? If you already can see what the actual measurements are of specific items.
Yeah, you can see it per fit. That makes a lot of sense. Last but not least, like Gedien said, we had a BI product bed dashboard, we got a purchase dash or sales dashboard, and we added, well, to make the list complete, a purchase dashboard, which is basically a copy of the sales dashboard. Of course, you will see the same tab pages coming up, but in both the sales and the purchase, we added a CSR tab page, which reflects the outgoing and the incoming transfers, so the product receipts and the product packing slips, and will show the CSR classification which they had at that moment. So 4 small pieces which I'm going to show. So let's move back to Dynamics. This one. Allocation, preview, and insight. So let me try to find it in the menu. It's always a challenge. Order allocation definition. This is functionality which was already there, but it was also always mandatory to end the last step with release to warehouse. Of course, you can then run it in batch with a recurrence, but you did not have any insight what has actually happened during this order allocation definition, and it was mandatory to end with the release to warehouse. So there's no way to have a manual interference at any point. We changed that, so it's not mandatory to end with release to warehouse, but you can still define the steps which can run in batch even on a recurrent base. So I first start in this case by selecting a certain product. So the parameters, clear the reserve now, run a calculation by priority, and in my parameters I can define which priority, which tick marks, all the options you have within the release to warehouse if you run it manually, and end up with filtering on only the fully covered lines. I can run this in batch, and when it has run, I can see the executions. So in this case, it's an old one. Actually, my colleague did this one, so I did not, bother to create a new one by using the old one. And it showed what did it actually do. And for each step, you have a log file, how many records were processed. So even with this many records were processed, and it will show the outcome during the calculation or the selection, the reservation, and the calculation. From here, so this is the execution of the batch, I can open this one. It will open my release to warehouse form with the outcome of my batch. So in this case, everything that's reserved now, I can reserve it and release it to warehouse from here, or I can decide to interfere in a single line. So it's a combination. Either it's part manually, it's part batch, but you can decide, okay, where do I stop the batch and continue manually, or do I decide just to run the entire batch job up to the part where you release the warehouse? This is a result of some discussion we had with the partner and customer, because the actual calculation took a lot of time. It's a performance, might be a performance killer. So they decided, okay, let's do that part in batch, but we do want to exclude some specific customer at a later stage. So what if we can run it in batch, have all the heavy stuff being done during the night, and then during the day we pick up the result and we're gonna delete, remove some small lines, or maybe change the values. Let's go here. Pending CSR classifications. And I will use the example on a vendor, and adding a CSR classification on a vendor or a production site might trigger a checklist. So in this case, on this vendor, there are no CSR classifications, and as you can see, there are no pending CSR classifications. So this is a tab we added. But the moment I'm going to add a CSR classification certification, which needs certain checklist to be mandatory, so I can check these marks. If I now press it OK, it will give me a warning. Yeah, it's nice, but this one is a mandatory check. So in our previous version, you could not continue. You needed to check everything, although you might not have done that actual check. We now have the option to save it as a pending CSR classification. It will show up here. Let me refresh. It will show up here where you can change it and add it at a later stage. But, well, I need to refresh, otherwise the edit button won't show up. I can do it here on the vendor itself, or I can decide to go to accounts payable. vendor pending CSR classification or production site pending CSR classification, depending on what level. If I open in here, I can see the one which I just created by use of the back office. Of course, if you're using our app to create them, it will have an other creation mode, but they still be able to save it as a pending in our app. I can edit it from here and continue setting the different mandatory checklists. If I now press OK, it's, well, of course, gone from my pending CSR classification, and it will be available as a CSR classification on my vendor. So it's a way to, well, to store adding a CSR classification when you're halfway. Okay. For the other ones, I need to switch to another environment. Let's see. Yeah, of course, my session ended.
But I think it's good to stress that this pending CSR certification is fully also working in the Power App that we have.
Yeah.
I've mentioned already, but we adopted that at the same time. Because I guess it reflects the reality that sometimes you don't certify like in 1 minute, but it's more a process of a couple of days or so.
Yeah, but it could also be that some checklist items should be done in the back office by other people, right? But people in the Power App can say, okay, I'm going to add it, save it as pending. They can pick it up.
Yeah.
And continue from there. But it's important that it's not mandatory to finish the entire process in one go. You can sort of save it.
Yeah, and that reflects reality. Yeah. Okay, next one.
Okay, other environment. No, this is another environment. Yeah, I always need to. Okay, let's see. Like I said, we have already added.
You need to stay awake.
Yeah. We added multiple parts of PDM data to the e-commerce. Well, we created building blocks for it, so you can just add it in your site builder yourself, but at least the data is there available and they can be shown in different ways. One of this was the CSR classification, the wash and care instructions, the compositions, some base details like brand and country of origin, but now we also have the option to add the measurements. So, and as you can know, let's go to the release product and just pick a product. And it's the first time I open this form in this environment. I will show you a product which only has sizes and colors, and I can show you a product which has sizes and colors and fits. At least I will show you both in the web shop, and I'll show you the first one in Dynamics. So 320-101, one of our favorite. Come on. Yep. Where you can set up the different measurements and the measurements positions, of course. If we look at the measurements positions, you can define all the measurements which you want to, or all the positions which you want to store measurements on. But as you can see, you can also tick mark which positions are applicable to be sent over to the e-commerce. You can change this on the fly, of course, but I decided I just want 4 positions being shown on the web shop. If I go back to the actual measurements themselves, and as you already might know, measurements can be or are phase dependent. If an item is in design phase, the measurements might be different than it's actual when it's in production phase or sales or whatever phase you define. But you need to, at least if you want to send over to the e-commerce, you need to at least define one phase. So in this case, the final phase, which is applicable for e-commerce. So in this case, it will send over, excuse me, the measurements which are linked to this phase and those 4 positions to our web shop. You can check, of course, here which phases are ready to e-commerce. You can't tick mark 2 or 3 because you can only send one phase over to the e-commerce part. You can tick mark more positions. So in this case, this data will be sent over to the web shop. I did the same with an item with sizes, colors and fits, and I will show you how it will look in the web shop itself. So let's switch over to the first item, the casual shirts. And I think it's the casual polo. I think I've been using this for a long time. So in here we have the product details for fashion, country of origin, brand, the compositions, and here it's showing the measurements as defined in our back office, right? With the 4 positions, and it's showing the measurements for the phase final. Of course, the wash and care instructions, CSR classification, they're all there. This is showing per size and per phase because we don't have any fits. But if we would look at the same data within men's jeans, and I think I've set up what we call the Ralph jeans. I just didn't set up a picture because this is a 3-dimensional item which has sizes, colors, and fit. It can show all the measurements for the different fits. So fit 32, 34, 36, and I decided just to publish 3 measurement positions with the different values per size. So this is what Gedien says, right? If you don't need to publish just an average size for all fits, but you can actually, for each fit, you can publish the different measurements for each size. Any questions on this part?
No,
Okay.
not at the moment.
But you must admit, it looks cool.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least is a dashboard we added. You're probably all aware that we had the K3 Fashion product dashboard and we had the K3 Fashion sales dashboard. Well, we couldn't live without the purchase dashboard. So if we open up a dashboard, it will open, well, anything related to purchase. Let me just filter it by a single company. And let's, well, make it a bit bigger. So first page, purchase per product, where you can select the category, brand. It will show the season groups. Season group, you can filter down in different season, country, and a nice graphical view where it has been purchased. We have another tab page by type. And by type, you will get a split between sample orders and non-sample orders. And for the sample orders, the different sample types. So as you know, on our purchase order category, you can define whether or not it's a sample order or not. And that will be reflected in this tab page. We have a tab page which is called purchase by vendor. So next to the same category, seasons, you can split it up by vendor groups. The vendor top 10, it will show the actual vendors and the total amount, and even drill down to country. Purchase by season, of course, over the different seasons, and you could even compare the different seasons, but I would advise take a close look at this. Well, there are different tab pages, of course. Comparison by year, but what's more important, in both sales and purchase, we added the CSR tab. And next to category and item number, it will show a list. And maybe if you've seen it before, within Dynamics, we had the CSR tracing, which gave an overview of all in and outgoing transactions of items and was showing the CSR classification which they had at that moment. The same information is now split into two. So the purchase CSR classification trace, and we got the sales CSR classification trace, which will show for each item on which specific purchase order, what were the actual CSR classifications those items had at that moment during receipt. We have the same functionality on the sales side, so you will find the same CSR tab in there. For the rest, sales and purchase are in sync. Of course, this is a base. You can extend it as well as you would like, but at least it's a good starting point.
Yeah, and good to be used in demos, right? To show the power of everything coming together in a report. Yeah.
Yeah, demos always look cool. Any other questions so far?
No.
Because those will cover the points which I would like to show. Or at least I'm aware that the spring release was a big release. We added a lot of functionality. I still would advise you to closely look into the release notes, because I think I've never written a bigger document than this release notes. And if there are any questions or about other parts of the functionality release, feel free to drop us a note. We will be adding more videos on the different topics, as we did for the costing part, because we know they're new or they are extended in such a way that the old videos are not up to date. So please let us know if you have any remarks, questions, requests for extending different parts.
Yeah, so I guess that's makes this webcast coming to an end. Like I said, we will make it available on the portal, and links will be shared with the people that subscribed for this, so you're free to share it with the rest of your team. Hope you enjoyed it, and well, it's very good to have a look at the documentation portal always, because we try to keep it as up to date as possible, and there is a lot of information to be found there that can help you in your day-to-day business. So thanks for attending, and have a good evening or a good rest of the day, depending on where you are.
Okay.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.